Oh, goodness.
Normally people have weird.
This is Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Here are your hosts, Dr. Tim Slekar and Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, educated educators talking education.
Welcome Tuesday night, Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk, educated educators talking education. It's Tuesday night. The number's 855-752-4842. Give us a call. Jump right in. Johnny, it is Tuesday. We made an announcement yesterday that this was
we
trending.
teased it. That's for sure.
We teased it, but trending news, and then it's like we didn't have a guest. I'm like, wait, we do though. I forgot all about this.
We do.
And so, we put out a call for volunteers. We've answered that call. I find people out on Facebook, on X or whatever it's called now, and I identify them. I'm like, you sound like a good guest. Well, there's this Mrs. K out on X putting out provocative statements about teaching and learning. And I was just like, hey, you'd be a good guest on Busted Pencils. And she's like, well, really? And so we brought her in. We're going to bring her in, though. So let's check this out. Mrs. K, well, that's Melinda Karshner. She holds a master's degree in teaching with an emphasis in curriculum and design. She's got 20 years in education, teaching elementary, middle school, math, Johnny, science, and robotics. Welcome to Busted Pencils. Mrs. K, how are you, Mrs. K?
I'm good. Thank you both so much for having me today. I'm excited to chat education with you.
I know. And when we said, excellent. It is good stuff. So getting you to the show though. Yeah. I think I was out. Is it called trolling when you're out just going through X and stuff like that? I don't know what it was.
Scrolling, not
scrolling. Okay.
Is when you're being mean.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I just look out there and I'm like, where it is. And I come across you and you hit a spot for me because it was instantly a critique of testing. And as we were saying before the show began, Johnny, I was sharing with Mrs. K that actually in 2011, I took No Child Left Behind on full force and opted my children out of high stakes testing. And you know what? That brought us back into talking about saying, I think we might have something in common because as a classroom teacher, Mrs. K, you seem to also put out a sense of going, a little bit concerning. And in fact, we were talking about this. It is testing right now where you're in Colorado, correct?
Yeah. So right now we are in the midst of what's called CMAS testing. So we've been doing, this is our second week. Last week we did ELA. And it's 3 tests, 90 minutes. My sweet fourth graders read some passages and then wrote some what looked like intense essays. I wish that I could read them, but it's all very locked down. So I'll never be able to see them, but it looked like they did great. This week we're doing math. So it's kind of a drudge of 2 weeks. And I think the hard part as an educator is really like losing that 2 weeks of instruction that is very much needed. And then we have another month of school left. So it's just this weird system that I think just needs a lot of adjustment. And it just should be better for kids, in my opinion.
90 minutes a day, you said, right, for testing. And fourth graders, those are 9 and 10-year-olds?
Yes, 9 and 10-year-olds.
Okay, 9 and 10-year-olds. So every day for 2 weeks, sitting for 90 minutes doing testing.
Yeah, well, 3 days a week. So there's 3 tests in each subject areas. And then 5th graders and I believe 8th graders have to do science. And some years 4th graders get to do social studies. So it would be 3 weeks, 3 days, which is just a lot for kids. It's a lot. And then I think, like as I was watching them last week, really dive into the writing that they were doing. Again, I wish that I knew what the prompt was. I wish I could see it. They were working so hard and they were so involved. And I think there's a sadness for me and for them. Like, well, they'll never be able to look back at the essay. I'll never be able to look at the essay. Their parents will never be able to celebrate that essay with them. So there's just some kind of like, what are we even doing? And I think it could be reformed to be more useful in the classroom, to be more useful instruction. but it just doesn't feel like it's genuinely sucking 2 weeks out of these kids. They're 9 and 10 of their education. It's just a lot.
The description, though, you had said that too, and I think that's really this past week where I saw you putting this on X was that reflection of recognizing that doing their writing assignments and the passion and the commitment that these 9 and 10-year-olds were giving it to putting into doing their best writing. And for anybody who's listening going, well, yeah, that's what you do in school. We test them on writing. You gotta understand, in this situation, in this setting, what you just said, Mrs. K, though, is that they are reading a writing prompt that essentially is a sentence that says, describe your most favorite family vacation or something like that. And off they go. You as the teacher don't get to see that prompt. They
Yep.
spend how much time really writing their greatest stuff. You never get to read it. The parents never get to read it. Some bureaucrat who hired some testing company who then hired some other contractor who at this point, we're not even sure if that person might be a person, is going to then score those written documents, send in the results, not to you, just to wherever. And so here it is then. What are they doing this for?
Yeah, and I think that's, again, my problem. Like, we see the scores, and so I know if a kid is reaching proficiency. I know what standards they're doing well on, but I think, like, from a teaching standpoint, especially, again, it's taking 2 weeks. It's not the best way to inform my instruction. Certainly not this year, and maybe not so much next year either, because next year when we get to school, we won't see the result until September. By then, we've already done all the assessments that we need to do to see what kids need what. Are there any kids in 4th grade that still need decoding? Are there any kids, like, what do they need? Do they need enrichment? Do they need this? Do they need that? So we've already done that right when we get back, and we already have the information we need to drive our instruction. So I think if this was like a day of testing, a day of math, a day of language arts, I'd be like, cool, okay, that's great. Then we did it. The state gets the information. It's all standardized. We can see, like, are the kids getting what they need? Are the kids where they need to be? Do we need to make adjustments based on these 2 days of testing? I think I'd have very little problem with it then. It's the amount of time that it's taking, in my opinion, away from authentic instruction and then producing authentic things that they're proud of and that they can look back on.
Johnny Lupinacci, is this bringing back memories to when you were in the classroom, dude?
I mean, Tim, yes, but I fortunately, in my classroom teaching time, we didn't have as many days as teachers have now taken. It's really crept. It's really like seeped in, right? It's spread like, like kudzu plant. I mean, it's just like once you start doing this testing, it's like, wait, we're testing again this week. Oh my gosh, another day. So, when I was teaching, it wasn't all the time, and it wasn't as frequent as so many classrooms across our country experience. So it is bringing back some memories, but I also remember being in a place where, Mrs. K is sharing, like, I can see sometimes why we have these tests. Like, okay, great. But behind the scenes, Tim, what we know is, like, those scores are also communicated back to us as teachers, and then for parents seeing those scores and things in kinds of terms that don't really tell a whole lot in terms of where their child really is, in terms of, we could say they're proficient or not proficient. And what we had the experts on last week, at least 2 times in the last month, Tim, saying is, like, that doesn't necessarily mean they're behind. That the proficiency is set so high sometimes at the top 20%. So if you can imagine, like, a bell curve, to be above proficient, you're in that top 20th percentile, and everything not in that is deemed as, not proficient, or, we start to think of as not at grade level, because that's typically what we think of when we're doing these kinds of assessments, is like, where is my 3rd grader at? Are they at 3rd grade level? And what we're learning is that that's not even the case anymore. We've increased the amount of work young people are doing in classrooms. And behind that is, like, underwriting that is the hard work teachers are doing to make sure these young people are meeting all these learning goals and having these opportunities to learn. So we just keep stacking the expectations higher and higher. removing the time for instruction, like Mrs. K is talking about, like, okay, give me a couple days every now and then, but to take essentially, I think I did a little of the math in my head quickly, fellow math teacher, let's go with the maths, but I counted at least 9 hours, of course, across 2 weeks that young people are sitting, taking a test. The kind of impact that has on a young learner, all kinds, even if you are, really comfortable, sitting and getting, which tons of kids need to move around and be engaged in more ways than just sitting there. But 9 hours over the course of 2 weeks of filling in bubbles or punching in, if it's on a computer system, just taking tests. I have to imagine that that's less about engagement, more about forced compliance, and not really telling us a whole lot of what we as teachers need. Mrs. K, I got to tell you, one, thanks for being a teacher, because I always say this is some of the best work we can do in our country to be defenders of democracy, to invest in future generations. But you're out there doing the work, you're in your classroom. So I got to ask you, what is your favorite part about being a teacher? Because I'm gonna connect it back, but I just think teaching is so great that when we get a great teacher on, I just want to highlight that what is it you love about being a teacher?
I've been a teacher for 20 years now, so I've had opportunities to go outside of the classroom, and always find myself coming back. I really enjoy working with kids. I think it's fun. It's just really fun. And I found out of the classroom, even in small, there was one year where I did just math in elementary school for gifted kids. And it just, I don't know. I think it was the absence of, honestly, I think language arts, where you're really getting kids to become critical thinkers, and especially in 4th and 5th grade and middle school, they're really coming up with their own ideas, and they're becoming their own person, and you're getting them to analyze information and to really grow as productive members of society. There's just something. That's what drew me to education. I originally was going to be an engineer, and to my especially dad's horror, switched to teaching. And I mean, we still joke about that a lot. And he will laugh like you would be making, like, I don't know, 10 times as much money, but you made the right choice. Like, you're happier in this career. I think things got kind of weird the last 4 years in education, as we all know, but
we did.
It just really is a joyful profession.
Loving it. Mrs. K, our guest on Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk, 855-752-4842. We got Mrs. K back, and we're going to do trending news with Mrs. K right when we get back.
Hey, Tim and Melinda, great job. When we come back, though, I want to follow up. Tim said, hey, Tim, come on, before we get into the news, because news is news. I want to follow up with, Mrs. K sharing that really great reasoning why education, why be a teacher. But I want to bring it back because we've been talking about last week a lot, like, good teaching is really relational.
Yeah.
And some of that is taking, like, this standardized test stuff, and then really, like you said, those curriculum materials you brought last week, Tim. That's just taking the personality and the relationship building out of teaching. And so, like, just bringing it back, like, as we go into these trending news, it's just great to hear that at the essence of this is, that relationship stuff, like being present where young people are forming opinions, ideas, thinking critically about the world. It's just
20 seconds.
There's nothing like it.
No, and you said it and what drives you in there. I mean, 5th grade was my favorite grade to teach too, because there was just something about their genuine curiosity and interaction. Coming back. Yeah. Help is on the way. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Educated educators talking education. Our guest, Mrs. K, teacher, 20 years plus experience. Just going through, though, these last 2 weeks, dealing with testing. Johnny, though, you put that question to Mrs. K. Yeah, we're going to hold on the news about what it is. Keep going, Johnny Lupinacci.
Well, I mean, our listeners got to hear. It's always a gift when we have a teacher on. Every Wednesday, we have teacher Joanna, teacher Hallie, but tonight we have our guest, Mrs. K, who has taught, 20 years. And keeps bringing us back to this essence of, being present at young people forming opinions, having, developing sort of a critical literacy, how they take information in and then apply it. And that is really relational. And so being in the classroom in those ways where teachers, like we've talked about before, they're highly skilled, they have a craft, almost like an art in being present at the birth of new ideas. And it's such an important thing that young people have someone who loves to be around them and who genuinely finds a calling and also has a set of expert skills at that. And this is Mrs. K's sharing this, what we're talking about, great teaching and really good teaching is relational. And I can't help but think, and it is flashbacks when Timmy said, are you reminded of something? The way standardized testing and then canned curriculums, and Tim, you brought in some of those materials last week. We talked about them, and the idea of teacher proofing a classroom, of making it so we don't have that opportunity, is part of why so many people leave teaching. And so I can't help but say, one, thank you, Mrs. K, for the work you do, but two, for reminding our listeners that great teaching is relational. And you described it so well, having that be part of your day-to-day hard work is rewarding. But you also said it's getting hard. The last few years, it's we see lots of people leaving education. We've been thrown multiple curveballs, whether it's COVID or whether it's, the defunding of our schools or increased charter school movements. And so and a polarized political climate where there's all kinds of legislators saying what we can and can't do in the classroom. And you're like, hey, I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm pretty good at it. And you seem to be making it harder and harder for us to do what experts, and I'll put kind of quotes around experts, but really researchers around the world have said, hey, good teaching, it's really relational. And it's important that we have people that understand that. So I just want to thank you again for that work. But then say we can't thank our teachers enough, at least in the world right now, it's a tough time to be a teacher. So, hey, let's praise our teachers. Let's lift them up, but let's also acknowledge that they're doing really important, highly skilled, hard work. So thank you for that. And then too, we can jump into trending news, but I wondered maybe you could speak a little bit to that, relational part of teaching and how testing kind of either interferes with that or kind of interrupts that flow.
Yeah, and I think if I reflect on my success as a teacher, most of it is the relational part. And thank you for pointing out how the level of skill that a really good teacher needs is really high, on top of, skilled with the relationships building, and then skilled with delivering the content and understanding pedagogy. I can't speak right now, I'm so tired. Understanding everything that we need to know, the knowledge of teaching, reading, and the science behind teaching in general, teaching and learning. And yeah, I feel I know when COVID hit in March, there was this deep mourning from teachers, because this time of year that everything shut down is the magic part of the year, where we've done all this work to build our community, and we've done all of this work to get kids where they need to go, and they finally have all these skills that they need to really produce. And then it's this magical time of year where we're doing amazing things with them, and they're producing amazing projects. And testing, there's this 2-week kind of crunch where we have all this momentum and we've done all this stuff, and they are writing persuasive essays and they have all of these ideas, and then hold on, everybody, we got to pause. We got to do this testing. You're still going to show off all the skills that you have, but kind of in a different, way more boring way. And then we'll pick back up, and hopefully we can get that momentum again. So I think that's, for me, another part of this testing lull, because it's so long. It does take that momentum that we've built. We've worked them hard. We've gotten them to, not to be cliche, to move mountains, and they're here. They're at this really great point. And now we need to do testing. And now let's please get back to all the cool stuff that we're ready to do.
Well, thinking of that though, too, how do the kids adjust to that? From your experience now. So, how are they? You said they're focused, they're passionate, they're putting their best effort in. do any of them say, I don't want to do this, Mrs. K? Or any of them nervous about the results because they fully realize why they're doing these tests at this point? What's the atmosphere like in school during this? Well, I was reading last night that there's a school, and this was happening back when I was opting my kids out, though, pep rallies for tests to get the kids ready and psyched up for testing. And I saw actually our guest last night, Johnny Mitchell Robinson, was like, you have got to be kidding me that schools are putting on pep rallies to get kids ready for testing. Melinda, Mitch is a state board of education member in Michigan and a professor. He's actually putting forth a resolution next week to actually get rid of high stakes testing in the state of Michigan. It'll be a resolution, but he's really just like, really, a pep rally? I mean, what is it? So a child who's sitting there, they're excited. Do you see ones that are nervous? Do you see some that are internally kind of putting an anxiety together? You're nodding your head. Give me some examples of what you see in students' eyes.
Yeah, it's really all of the above. So I think, like, in defense of the pep rally, because it is such this like intensive 2 weeks, and they are nervous about it. And again, teaching is so relational. You really have to. It's this weird balance of like getting the kids not to be too nervous, because it's really not going to be a reflection on them, but it's just this weird, like, I don't even know how to explain it to kids most of the time. Like, you do have to do your best, but no, of course, sweetie, you're not going to be held back. Like, it's totally fine if you fail, but also you can't fail. You don't need to be nervous at all. Let's be excited. I kind of always approach it as like, well, this is our chance to just show off what you know. Sometimes these tests have these questions that seem like they're here to trick kids. So like this year we were like, you're going to find the sus answer, because kids really like the word sus. And you're going to make sure like you beat the test makers, and you kind of have to, because some of them are just okay with it. Some of them are really nervous. So you have to kind of ease the tension, and it's a lot. Especially again, given what it is, which is not meaningful.
Yeah, Tim, it's kind of mixed. I'm kind of with Mrs. K here. Like, I always thought, like, I was part of this, like, there's this mixed bag. Like, when you're throwing a pep rally for the test, or like in these things, on this other end, like, you're sort of co-signing on something you're not agreeing with, but at the same time, I'm also like trying to signal to them, like, you matter, we care about you, we're gonna try and get you some fun stuff. And like, just do this, please. Like, we all have to. When we come back, Tim, I mean, take us into the break, but when we come back, let's dive into that. Also, one of the reasons why we had to do those pep rallies was because our count days were testing days. And so we had to make sure our kids were there, because kids were like, hey, it's testing day. I'm going to be home. Like, I'm done with these things.
Oh, man. Counting busted pencils, fully leaded. More when we get back with Mrs. K. Well, Mrs. K, you have made it through 2 segments and 1 segment to go.
Woohoo!
Crushing it. Thanks for coming on tonight, too.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
What do you think?
It was fun. It was fun. I love talking education.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's the other part, though, too. It's just like, really? You've got a radio talk show about education and education policy? I'm like, heck yeah, we do, man. There are lots of weird people in the world like us. Talking about that. But the kids, how is when I was at the height, when I was really doing this, I mean, there was a ton of pressure. When I opted my kids out, I mean, I had, teachers and principals that were really suspect about this, because my kids, and this is No Child Left Behind, with serious consequences for not doing well on those tests. And my kids, the pre-testing showed that they would be testing really well. And so pulling them out, one of the biggest fears of the opt-out movement is that the most people that are the people who are going to tend to opt out are going to be the ones whose kids already are doing well. And therefore, if you get too many of them opting out, it's going to really bring the school's scores down. And so there was a lot of pressure put on teachers to try to, dissuade opt-outs. There was, we even got lots of guilt and public shaming for it
Oh my
because
gosh.
the consequences were so high. You might not get meeting adequate yearly progress. That was what it was. Johnny, you remember AYP?
I remember
AYP is still around, man.
Yeah, man. But I mean, and that was the one of the things I used to get crazy with. I would be like, I'm like, so really, we're gonna put in our trophy case our adequacy flag. We were adequate last year. Awesome. I'm so glad we're striving for adequacy.
Yeah, Tim, you're bringing back all kinds of nightmares for me.
Yeah.
Well, and we had this thing where we were graded. We got like a teacher report card that stayed with us no matter what district we went to or wherever. And I did really well on those, but it was always over 50% of your grade as a teacher, your annual grade was based on your students' test scores. And so, yeah, it was
the last thing you want are your good testing kids to be not showing up.
Well, and it's impossible to keep up your momentum because you also like 1 year you have 80% of your class at proficient or at or above grade level. The next year you have a totally different group of kids. Who knows what's happening in the world, right? Like what's going on to influence outside of school. But then let's say you have like 74% at or above grade level. Not bad. I mean, like, you're doing good teaching. Some people are just, maybe you have more students who needed a little bit more work, but your grade is going to go down. And in fact, even if you had the same, like 84, they wanted you to have 86 and then 88 and then 90. And it was like, oh my gosh, if I didn't leave teaching when I did, I would start getting bad grades because this was like, I was reaching a point where I was like, I'm not going to get 96% passing. Like this standardized test, like that's impossible. My best years I've had like 84 and that was like a miracle. And I'm standing on my head. Like I can't keep this up. It's not
it was always this 100% proficient with yet a heterogeneously mixed class. And it was like, okay, you guys have never taken basic testing and assessment data. You're giving me a heterogeneous, academic group of kids. And you're trying to say that, and within that, we all along the bell curve, you're saying, okay, bell curve no longer applies now, though, Johnny Lupinacci. You need all of your students in that tail end, the 20%. You're like, well, that won't make a bell curve anymore. 50. Okay. It was all, it was like, okay, we have a heterogeneous grouping, academically oriented kids. 100% fully proficient ain't gonna happen. Therefore, automatic failure. And
hey, you want to take us into trending news this next segment?
Yeah, I'm going to go right into it.
Yeah,
be adequately, passively adequate. Yeah, I just saw that.
I'm just trying to cheer you guys on. This is our pep rally for the second half. Be adequate, passively
be adequate. Yes, adequate.
We used to give away iPods. There would be raffles for it, all kinds of stuff.
We for actually testing?
Yeah,
coming back
for test days.
Here we go. We are sweating. Well, I don't know. I am here.
Yeah, I am too.
Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Educated educators talking education. Our guest, Mrs. K, 20-year teacher out there on X, making really great comments about teaching and learning. Sparked Busted Pencils interest. We put out an invitation to see if Mrs. K would want to come on as a teacher guest. She accepted an invitation. She's here talking about the joys of teaching, how you mix those with the sorrows of testing, and how that all comes back. But more importantly, what Johnny was saying is the thanks, though, that we, especially at Busted Pencils, want to give you, Mrs. K, and all of your colleagues out there for the work that you guys do every day. Because you say the relationships that you have with those kids, and we know this for anybody who's been a teacher, that is why you do it. You're out there, we get through the 2 weeks of testing. We have to, so that we can get back to those relationships and doing things that matter for children and families. But here we go. So we're going to invite you, Mrs. K. One of the things we do on Busted Pencils is We like to look at education trending news and then do a little commentary on the news. I have some news stories. I try to not let Johnny know what's coming just so I can get his kind of gut reaction, catch him off guard, throw it out there. So we're going to ask you, though, as a guest commentator on the news, to just, throw in what you think when I put out these news stories. So news story number 1, coming out of the K-12 dive, Democratic leaning states move to curb book bans. Freedom to read legislation under consideration or passed in several states would require libraries to present diverse points of view or risk losing funds. And here we go, not losing fun. Well, maybe losing fun too. More Democratic leaning states are seeking to curb or prohibit book bans as a counter to the wave of curriculum and media censorship that has spread across the nation in recent years. So now we've got states with book bans, and now we're going to see states that have anti-book bans. And you teachers, Mrs. K, are going to have to figure out which state you want to go to from now on, whether you want to go to a book banning state or an anti-book banning state. What do you think about this news, Mrs. K?
Well, I mean, living in Colorado, thank goodness, we don't have the book banning legislation heavy on us, but I think and I will stay in whatever state does not have legislation like that. But I think even without book bans, the culture is so intense and the rhetoric around book banning is so intense that I think there's still a lot of teachers, even like in my state of Colorado, who still have this fear when wanting to include books that represent different cultures and different identities. And I mean, there's so much research out there on the importance of having books that mirror kids' identities, that we know it's necessary. And yet I think just because of all of this that's going on, even in states that are, I'll say safe from book bans or safer from book bans, there's still that fear. And so I think there's still teachers that even self-censor because it's this like, if I have this book out there, am I going to get in trouble because it's in my library, because it's on display?
And Mrs. K, you said that, and Johnny, we look at this, it's that chilling effect. And you say, okay, so you're, quote, in a potentially safe state, and now Illinois now is actually considered the first state to absolutely actively no book bans in the state of Illinois. However, teachers, as you just say, have heard this now for 2 years, something. And so whether or not, my question would be is, do the teachers in these states that are truly actively against book bans, are they letting go of that chilling effect to kind of self-center? Johnny, we always say about this, the intent really with these laws is never truly to enforce them because they're not really enforceable because they'll get dismissed in court cases. Their intent, though, is to scare, and they work really well at scaring. So will anti-book bans re-engage teachers, I think is the question, or has the chill already taken effect? Johnny.
That's a good question.
I mean, that is a good question. That is a good question because I kind of echo what Mrs. K is sharing. It doesn't matter what state you're in. I mean, I'm in a state that's very, Democrat run and also has pretty great great respect for teachers and has teacher autonomy. And in most districts, there's a process to formally introduce books into the curriculum. If they're going to be part of like a new course or anything. And so there's a system of accountability that makes it sometimes feel like, okay, but I don't necessarily know with that chilling effect, with that national political climate that we're in, like that doesn't mean that there won't be opposition to, having like maybe queer identities in a story or having particular Black history centered in a novel that we read. I do think exactly what Mrs. K said, wherever you are, like this is on your mind. This is something you're thinking about. And that's a sad moment for good teachers, because what we know is we want to always present our students with the best information at developmental levels they're at. that mirrors back what maybe pediatricians or psychologists or, experts have told us, like young people have these diverse identities, and that these stories help not only recognize but bring value to diversity in our community. And when they're part of our learning, that's essential, and that's really good learning. And so even if you're in a state that is, say, like anti-book banning, there's still this whole political climate. Well, like I have to also report on why and what I'm teaching. And there's this fear, like there's this myth that we're out here indoctrinating children, or that we're trying to force particular views or ideas on them. When in general, we're really, almost all of us, I can't speak for every single teacher, but every kid deserves to have a experience in a classroom that represents valuing children's rights, human rights, and especially that help through, and I think about this in literature, the books we're talking about, that help us understand the complex situations we're in as young people, right? And so whether it's a book about an immigrant's experience or identity development, I think these are really important to have in our classrooms. And wherever you are, I think there's been a chilling effect. So I'm kind of glad that like these states have this anti-book banning legislation. But again, it just feels like people at a table throwing darts at each other, like Republicans and Democrats, hashing out something good teachers are like, can you please just let us teach?
Yeah.
Just
Please. Mrs. K, jump in there, Mrs. K. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel that please just let us teach is so essential right now. And I think we were talking earlier about teachers starting to leave the classroom. And I think a lot of this plays into that, because it really is like we know what kids need. We know there needs to be representation. We know kids need mirrors. They also need what Rudy and Sims Bishop called windows, mirrors, and doors, where they need to be exposed to diversity so that they can become critical consumers of information, and they can become critical at analyzing their own life and others' lives and understanding their place in the world. And I think with all of this intensive legislation coming down, even like, again, like it's not in my state, we're absent from this, but there is still, even sometimes I'm like, I got this beautiful collection of books from Conscious Child, who is giving out books that are representative to teachers, any teacher that could. It was an amazing grant that they had last summer. And when I got them, I was just like wanted to cry tears of joy to see books that represented two moms, and books that represented just anything. There was like Hawaiian books, and there's just everything you could imagine. There was a book representing someone, and I took them to my classroom, and even I had the thought like, oh my gosh, am I going to get in trouble for some of these books? And I was taken aback by, even I had that thought, like, am I really questioning putting this beautiful picture book in my classroom? Yeah, I am, because of the political climate we're in. And I think that's just so sad right now.
It is. It's sad, and that's, they say, so congratulations, Yahoo, to the states that are making these passing. Illinois, having what they're calling, these are freedom to read legislations. I kind of like that taking over, because the other side is always really great at stealing great language. And so the idea of saying that, this is a state that you have the freedom to read in, I think there's something powerful about that. Look forward to more freedom to read. Got another news story though here. I want to get to Mrs. K and Johnny here. Got to get you on this one. And yes, I'm going to bring it up again, Johnny. But hey, from K-12 Dive, question is the headline. How much are students using AI in their writing? Yes. How much? It's been a year since grading and plagiarism detection platform Turnitin unveiled its artificial intelligence writing detection tool. Just months after AI research organization OpenAI made ChatGPT publicly available November 2022. Okay, at this point, by the numbers, 200 million, the number of papers reviewed by Turnitin's AI writing detection feature. Detections, 22 million, the number of student papers where at least 20% of the writing was AI content. 11%, the percentage of student papers containing at least 20% AI writing. 6 million, the number of reviewed student papers that contain at least 80% of AI writing. 3%, the percentage of student papers containing at least 80% AI writing. Mrs. K, your kids were just doing writing on their state testing. I don't think they were using AI though, were they?
Definitely not. We do use AI though. I think part of this problem right now is that it's so new, and I think teachers are afraid to incorporate it into their classrooms. But I think because so many students are using it, there's this fear for me that it could create cognitive atrophy, which is kids are just becoming so dependent on AI that they're not thinking. So I think teachers just need to start reframing how we're using AI in the classroom to move away from it's just a tool for kids to plagiarize and write 5-paragraph essays. And it is a good tool for writing 5-paragraph essays, but yeah, I think schools need to just start embracing and accepting AI is here, and it's not going to go away, and we need to figure out how to incorporate it into our lives. We just do. It's just it's here. We can't not have it.
So all of this concern about students using it for writing and the company turnitin.com's AI detection bots that are out there, who cares at this point? Johnny Lupinacci, I took a beating last week when we had our guest Tom Mulaney in here. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, Tom helped us differentiate. There's different kinds of AI. So he's saying like we should be really cautious of like having a chat bot, teach our kids. So we are not going to say like, hey, ask the chat bot to explain how to solve this equation. Like we don't want to like defer things to chatbots, which we know don't have the kind of accuracy and relationship capacity that like we have as teachers. So there's limitations to it. But I actually agree with Mrs. K. It's here. It's a tool. It's not just like a fad. It's going to be worked into the fabric of most professions as a tool. So understanding how to use it, its limitations and its strengths. And then again, like Martin Atkins, our guest a few weeks ago, Martin Atkins extraordinaire. He said like really this like the advent of the drum machine and technologies in music. And he's a drummer and then just a musician and a sound engineer and just an all around great guy and educator. But, he had said like, it was worried that like it's going to eliminate drummers. Well, no, it didn't. It just made the profession of drumming, you had to be really good at it. And so this is the same thing I think in our classrooms. Like it doesn't take the place of really great teachers, and great teachers are going to figure out how we're teaching it and how we're, preparing people for the world that they're going into as citizens and part of the workforce. And it's part of it, but it's going to make them really good at the things. So kids are going to have to be good at writing and understand what AI brings to that. They're going to have to be really good at reading and evaluating, hey, did what AI help me generate make sense? Is it accurate? Is it appropriate? Is it personal? Yep. And then, it's going to increase our quality, I do believe.
Busted Pencils.
I agree.
Mrs. K, thank you so much for busting pencils with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Extreme gratitude. Yes.
Gratitude.
Extreme gratitude.
We, Johnny and Tim, when we get back, break it down. And hey, guess what? We got a surprise. Well, it's not even a surprise. We're going to put some more
information. Yeah, it's a surprise. Big news. Big news.
Rumor confirmation. Back in a minute.
Thanks, Melinda.
Mrs.
Of
K,
course, that was fun.
Was that fun for you?
Yeah, that was fun.
Well, if you're interested, hey, anytime reach out. You know the contact here, and don't be surprised if we reach back, because I kind of like this idea of bringing on teacher guests and kind of doing the news with us as a team.
Yeah, it's fun.
And if you have any other colleagues out there who are interested, put them in touch with us, and spread the word. We're trying to kind of institutionalize Busted Pencils as the
30 seconds
radio show for anybody who's all about public education.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, all you need to do is you can just click out Melinda, and we will be in touch.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You too.
$10 seconds.
Hey. I like the idea of bringing teachers in like this for the news.
Yeah, it's
man.
fun. It's fun.
Yeah,
It's organic. It's organic too.
Oh yeah. There it is. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Educated educators talking education. Tuesday night, Mrs. K was in the house, teacher from Colorado, chopping it up with Tim and Johnny. Got a little bit of talk about what it means to be a teacher during these 2 weeks of testing, and then a little bit of review and commentary on the news. Freedom to read states Johnny Lupinacci, and then AI detection. I want to go to AI detection a little bit though, and kind of point this out. I really appreciated Mrs. K's take of and recognizing that, look, it's here. We're going to be needing to incorporate it. Your explanation of going, it could be this opportunity to make us better, and Martin Atkins reference to the drumming and how that makes us better. The one thing though, too, is what's interesting here is that every research article that I can see is that I got to question Turnitin's numbers, because the last time I checked, AI detection software has about, at least one of the experts I know saying, anytime you get an AI hit, you should usually try to think that it's usually a false positive, because its ability to detect AI generated material, it just can't do it. It's not the same as looking for plagiarism the way Turnitin was originally developed. And remember, even Turnitin, when it quote identified plagiarism, you really, if you were going to use that, you really had to then build a case and make sure, because the last thing you want to do is accuse somebody falsely of something like that just based on the use of some kind of computer tool. When it comes to detecting AI generated material, and this is one of the frightening things to a lot of people about AI, is that the material, it's getting to the point where it truly is undetectable. And so the ability then to say and accuse somebody, you may falsely accuse people of doing things inappropriately. And typically in AI, and using it in this sense, from this kind of like, oh my God, we're going to catch you using it. First of all, let's get away from that idea. They are going to use it. Let's engage them on how to use it in ways that are going to make them better writers, and stop worrying about catching people doing things, because they're already doing it.
Absolutely. And I'll give you a little story from class today, Tim. I have an assignment where we're getting towards the end of the semester, and these future teachers have been working together to develop lesson plans and sort of, units for how they are going to really teach social studies in a different way. And, one of the things, part of their final assignment, is I have them writing a little bit of a cover letter. Like, hey, write a cover letter that, introduces your take, your brand, your identity as a social studies teacher. And the first thing a bunch of them did was ask AI to do it. And you know what? And it was like, and some of them were like closing the windows real quick, and they're like, and I was like, hey, remember? And they're like, he doesn't care. So they had all this like chattering. I'm like, okay, let's not hide it. But I said, go ahead, give it a try. But remember, I know who you are as a teacher. I've worked with you for a while now. It's gonna do a pretty generic version of gobbledygook, like buzzwords in teacher and elementary education, and it did a great job of like filling the content. A generic cover letter that was grammatically good, and it was in there. I said, now take that and make it you, because right now it's not you. It's got a bunch of buzzwords in there. It's words that don't represent who you are as a teacher. But for a number of them, it got them unstuck, right? They weren't just looking at a blank screen. That's great. For others, it could say, like, can you see how it's kind of generic? Like, it doesn't really speak to the strengths you have as a teacher. I know that you really like designing project-based activities for your students. I know that you really like play as learning. I know that you really like universally designed learning. And even still, AI doesn't know the examples of how you do that in your teaching, right? So it's kind of just giving you a little cookie cutter template that has the words there, but doesn't have the personality. And the nice thing about it, and I'll pump my own tires a little bit, Tim, the nice thing about it is, like, they got to use it. They needed a little bit of approval, that they didn't need to hide it. And then two, we got to see how it brought some value to something that they needed to have their brand of, their input, their expertise. Did it speed it up for some of them? Probably. And that's okay, right? And then also it made me feel good because like the assignment wasn't meaningless. It wasn't busy work. It sounded like it was about to be busy work. Create a cover letter for your lessons. Some of them even put their lesson into the prompt. So it talked about like, hey, this is a cover letter for these lessons. It was still really generic. I was like, good start. Great work kind of prompting. Now clean it up. Make it you. And they were like, oh, okay, cool. So we have this sort of moment that we're talking about is a new technology, but it was open to ask questions about. We worked with it. We pointed out shortcomings. We informed one another about, hey, I put the lessons in there and it did a better job than leaving them out. I asked it to rewrite that cover letter, but include my degree. It's my degree is this, this, and this. And so it was like training and teaching. It was just part of the writing process. And you know what I saw, Tim? I saw them doing similar to what they would be doing without AI. Right. And the end goal was whether they had written it all themselves or whether they had put to work a tool that was at their, disposal. The end product was high quality. It was personal to their voice. They cleaned it up and they did a great job. And we got to teach with it in the classroom. So even though I hate on AI, Tim, and I take the side against it, here I am confessing how we used it today.
You're confessing.
In class.
And what you did, though, too, was explain the best, quote, AI checking is actually the teacher and the knowledge of who their students are and realizing that, hey, they're not going to, quote, turn it into you with just AI generated because they know that you know them and they can look at an AI generated piece of text and go, man, this doesn't sound like me. Dr. Lupinacci is going to know this isn't me. And it's not about, quote, catching them, but it is making sure and them realizing you can use this tool. It isn't going to be you. I'll know it because I know who you are and I know your passions. I know your styles. So use it to get you started, but then put you into it. So take this drum machine beat, feel it, learn it, and now then take it and put it to your own beat. Put it there, Johnny.
Well, and it also did this thing, how Martin Atkins said it, the drum machine, just put us in a position to be better drummers. I felt the same thing because the students said, oh, I get it. Like you're actually reading these, which tells me that they do a lot of assignments that nobody's reading. And I'm not talking about just my colleagues. Like I'm not trying to like out anybody. But I'm just saying like we do a lot of busy work that doesn't go to anything. And like Tom Mulaney said, why would you write something for nobody to read? So if it's meaningless, just plug it into AI and have it crap something out and turn it in. Otherwise, put good work into it. So we're going to get more into that, Tim, this week. We need to talk about our special event, but mark your calendars. April 30th. We'll have more tomorrow.